Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled to have with me as my guest Michelle Armond, who's the founding partner of Armond Wilson. Michelle, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, Richard.
So, Michelle, I think you're the first Caltech alum that I've had, Caltech alum lawyer I've had on this program. Obviously, there aren't that many of us, so we're in a small club, and it's great to have you.
Well, thank you. Woo woo for Caltech, and especially the lawyers.
Yes, exactly. Well, so that's a perfect segue to ask you why, given that you went to Caltech, why did you go to law school in the first place?
Wow, you sound like every other person I've talked to from Caltech. Well, Richard, I think it's partly your fault. I'm sure you don't remember, but as you mentioned, there's not that many of us. So when I was thinking about going to law school while I was still a student at Caltech in the 90s, so now we both sound old.
Yes.
There were not that many lawyers. And so I called you because I think you were almost the only one. There were maybe a couple. And I found you and I called you and I asked for advice because it was not, Caltech was not really a feeder school for lawyers in the 90s. And obviously you didn't scare me off. So here I am. But
what did I say? I don't remember this conversation.
You were very positive. I believe you were still in private practice and you loved your job, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so you highly recommended a career in IP, and so I took your word for it, and here I am.
Oh my goodness, gosh! I hope I don't regret that. I hope you don't regret that.
No, I should send you a thank you note. This has been great for me.
Interesting.
This is great.
Well, tell me
for you.
Well, tell me a little bit about. I'm always curious to know, because I always had an interesting experience when you first went to law school. What was it like? Did you like it right away? Was it a hard adjustment? I'm always curious to know how someone with an engineering degree kind of copes with that at the initial onset.
I loved it, I have to say. So, as you know, Caltech was not a feeder school for lawyers. And so it was very single-mindedly focused on science and engineering. And I was always really good at that and I enjoyed it. But about halfway through, right around the time probably I was calling you, I realized that it wasn't really fulfilling me fully, because I was the rare person at Caltech that was not just a science person, but I was also really interested in the humanities. I really liked public speaking. I really enjoyed writing. So I started to look for something more, and that's when law school kind of came up on my radar. Yeah. So when I was at Caltech, it was about 3/4 male, because again, it's a science and engineering school, and that's about all it is.
Yeah.
When I went to Berkeley for law school, it was actually the opposite ratio. It was 3/4 women. And so talk about culture shock.
Oh yeah.
So it was really a very different environment. But I really liked it. Berkeley was a great school, and I actually found it to be really easy because, Caltech's a very difficult academic environment. And so for the first time, I could watch TV, I could cook, I was able to recreationally play sports and spend time with my friends, not doing homework. So for me, it was kind of like a nice break, and I needed that because I went straight from Caltech into law school.
Oh, interesting. So take me, before you went to Caltech, sounds like you had kind of dual interests in your life. Did you think you went to, how did you choose to go to Caltech to begin with? Why didn't you go to a school that maybe had a better balance, like a Stanford or something like that?
Well, it's funny because I turned down Stanford to go to Caltech, and it's interesting to think about what would have happened had I gone to Stanford. It probably, knowing what I know now, would have been a better school, just, on paper. But I actually think that, despite the fact that Caltech was very oriented, and it still is today, on basically getting science and engineering grads into graduate school to either go into academia or go into these cutting edge industry jobs, despite that, going to Caltech has been one of the best preparations I could have had to become a lawyer, despite the fact that nobody really did it, especially back when we were doing it. And there's two reasons. One is it taught me that I could do anything, and it also taught me about the importance of teamwork. So as I mentioned earlier, Caltech was very, very demanding. I was probably the best math and science kid at my high school, and so was everybody else. So they were teaching at an extremely high level. And, I'm sure they called it the same thing when you were there, but, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. Like, it's moving at an incredibly fast pace. And I knew after I survived and managed to graduate from that school that if I could get through that, I could get through anything and I could learn anything. And so that's helped me be really fearless as I practice law. So that was good. And the other thing was the teamwork. So did they have AMA 95 when you were there?
No, they did.
Okay. So one of the things that I really liked about Caltech, and I actually strive to have this in my firm to this day, is, everybody there was very smart and wanted to do well, but there wasn't a lot of internal competition. So people actually worked together and collaborated together. So there was, the class that I know we both took called AMA 95, and I think it was deceptively called like Introduction to Applied Math, but it was really like linear differential equations, which everyone had to take. So it's a hard class. It didn't matter if you were an English major or a physics major or a math major, you had to take that class or something harder.
Yeah.
And it was a barrier to graduation for a lot of people. So I just remember, still to this day, I think the homework was due first thing on Monday morning. And there was usually like a session with the teaching assistant on Sunday night. And so you could walk around campus starting, maybe 8 o'clock all into the early hours of the morning and just see groups of students all around campus struggling to get through the homework for hours. And in fact, we would sometimes tour around all the various dorms to try to figure it out, because sometimes your study group would only have a couple problems and somebody else would have the other problems. But, we all got through it together. And so that collaboration and that lack of internal competition, I think, really breeds success. And so although like here at our firm, we really like to win and we're very competitive, we don't have that internal competition here, and it makes us such a great team.
No, very interesting. Yeah, just you talking about AMA 95 is giving me goosebumps again.
I know, is that triggering? It's a little triggering, huh?
Exactly. Well, tell me, when you went to law school, I mean, you obviously were interested in IP. We talked about it, but did you ever think about doing something else? Because that was the other thing when I realized when I got to law school. Actually, I didn't realize this when I went to law school, is that, obviously you could have done a number. You could have gone any number of practices. You could have been a transactional lawyer. You could have been a corporate. You could have done antitrust. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things. Did you think about that at all, or were you really focused on the IP and that's all you really looked at?
Well, it's funny. So yes, I know a lot of people with engineering backgrounds that ended up in various areas of the law, but once I found this groove, I have always been interested. So I went into law school wanting to be a patent attorney, and I had a very single-minded focus. I didn't really know if I wanted to be a litigator or a patent prosecutor, which is somebody that writes patent applications off, because I didn't really understand that difference. But I got a clerkship straight out of Berkeley at the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals in DC, which is like the Supreme Court of patent law.
Yeah.
And so after that, my trajectory was pretty set on litigation. And so I have been doing IP litigation with an emphasis on patent litigation for the last 20 something years. And it's been great. So I haven't wavered on that. And that is the perfect fit, because I do like the technology and I like those details. And I also really, really like the litigation aspect, and it suits my skills and
your competitive nature to win, I assume.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit. I'm curious to know what kind of range of technologies you've looked at or studied over the years. I mean, I'm sure you've done all kinds of things, but what are some of the highlights and perhaps some of the more interesting technologies you've had to grapple with?
So I do basically everything except pharmaceuticals. Like, pharmaceuticals is its own thing in patent litigation. So other than that, I've probably done it. And I have to thank, again, Caltech for that really broad experience. So I've had things that were anything from, like, I remember my first case out of, in private practice after my clerkship, somebody dropped source code on me. Like, I had to go to the other lawyer's office and sift through thousands of lines of source code. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I know what I'm doing here. So anything from even like I've had assembly language cases, so source code, electronics, chip layout, telecom, energy cases, renewable energy, all the way to, I have a lot of clients in consumer products. I've even had ones on like toys. So anyway, I've kind of done the whole thing. I've done a lot of work in medical devices, but a lot of mechanical stuff. I've had cases on like plumbing and door locks. Like I've basically done it all other than that. And it's so much fun to learn new things and become like an expert and really immerse yourself in the technology.
What's the thorniest or most complicated technology you've had to try to understand in your as a patent lawyer or as a patent litigator?
So probably the most technically complex are ones where we kind of need to reverse either source code or the chips. And there's not a lot of lawyers that can do that. So because of my electrical engineering background, I somehow always attract those. So we usually get those really like not just legally challenging cases, but also these technically challenging cases where you really do need like a hard science background, especially an electrical engineering background to get that. So we do a lot of work in that space, but we've really kind of done it all.
Do your clients appreciate the fact that you have that technical background? Does that come up a lot, or do they not, if they don't know it, or does that come up in your conversations with them?
I think like half of the clients are here for Caltech and the other half are here just to have a good time. So it's kind of a split between those two. Some maybe both.
What aspect of litigation do you like the best? I mean, obviously there's a lot of different aspects. I mean, is it the trial that you like best? Is it the strategy? Is it understanding the technology? What aspects of litigation do you really get you excited about?
Well, I really like to win. I mean, I'm very competitive and I really like working with teams. So that's what drew me in the first place. My original career aspiration was to become a writer, and writing is a very important part of the practice. You know, often a lot of issues are decided on the brief, certainly at the appellate court where I used to clerk, like those cases are largely decided on the briefs.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy making sure that work product is impeccable. But I like being in court. I like standing up. I like having kind of a back and forth with the judge. I like taking depositions. I like training people. Like there's just so much to this job and it really never gets old. Like this job has been a little bit different every single year of my practice. And I'm kind of excited to see what the next 20 years has for me.
Well, what possessed you to start your own firm? Now that's something that, obviously not many lawyers do. You obviously worked at big firms, so you did that, but what made you decide to start your own firm? Because that's a pretty unusual thing to do.
Yeah, no, it's unusual. And I think half of people think that that's amazing. And the other half are like, wow, that's a little crazy. But so I've been in the practice for about 20 years and I've really just done this one thing. And I'm still doing that same thing. I do IP disputes, I do appeals. And then about, I don't know, a little more than 10 years ago, they passed the American Invents Act. So now we get to litigate in the patent office and I'm a patent attorney. So that's like really my jam.
Yeah.
So anyway, I practiced at different firms, but most recently I was at Kenobi Martins. I was there, for 12 years as a partner and practice group leader. And my practice was really, really taking off and I had a wonderful time there. And so I was starting to get some interest from other firms about, coming over and starting or leading up their practice. And and they were right. It was time for me to go and find a place that was really going to support this growth that was happening. But life is short. I didn't want to just move for the sake of moving. I really, really wanted, to practice law with people I like and have my team and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to make sure my clients were well taken care of. And of course, conflicts always need to work out. So, lawyers are always a little bit risk averse.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot risk averse because that's why I went to law school in the first place.
Right.
So what I needed to start the firm is I wanted somebody I really liked and I wanted somebody that was an exceptional lawyer because, we do need to win and I enjoy that. And then I needed someone that was willing to I didn't think it was a big risk, but it was somewhat of a risk. So there was really only one person that fit that bill. And that was someone I met like straight out of law school, my co-clerk, Doug Wilson. So when I rolled up to the federal circuit, there was another, young lawyer from Texas there, and he and I have almost nothing in common, and we are the same person. So we have always been really, really good friends. And after our clerkship in DC, we went our separate ways. I went to California, he went to Texas, and we never practiced law together again, but we were always in contact and chatting and talking about law firm issues. So anyway, so I was like, I think we could just do this on our own. I just need, the right partner. So I called him up and I said, hey, I think it's time for us to start our own law firm. And he said, well, I've been thinking the same thing. And so that decision came together really fast. And then like the rest is history. That's the founding of Armond Wilson. And my only regret is that we didn't do it sooner.
Right. Well, what about all the, people talk about the headache of running a firm. Now you think about the administration, all the things you have to do as as running that, when you're practicing law, you just have to worry about that. And the firm kind of takes care of all that stuff. Is that a big overhead for you, or actually it's not a big deal, or what do you think?
That was probably the biggest surprise starting my own firm is it wasn't that hard. It wasn't as hard as I was expecting. So now that I have this job running a law firm, I realize I've been waiting my entire career for it. So, I think it takes the right personality. So I'm very entrepreneurial, and I've always been very entrepreneurial since I was a young person. Like, my family had a PC really, really early. And so when I was in middle school, had a business doing like word processing and graphic design. And I had clients I got off of the classified ads of our local newspaper. And like, that's always been great. And I like that aspect, the business aspect of being a lawyer. So in terms of administration, based on my experience being a partner at a larger firm, you still have to run that business. It's just a much larger, more complicated business. And so, even though I'm practicing law full time and this is a very demanding job, I actually think I spend less time on administration than I did and would at a large firm because we don't have any bureaucracy. There's no committees here. We have made decisions that drastically impacted our future in like a minute that, I can easily see and have seen at other firms have taken months, if not years, moving through committee and recommendations and study, and then you still get it wrong. So like, we are very nimble. We know where we're going and what we want to do. It makes our decision making very efficient, and we have the same vision. And so no, it's not much in terms of management and admin.
So how long have you had this firm, and how big are you?
Well, we are just celebrating our 4th anniversary. We started in spring 2019, right before the pandemic. And it was at the very beginning, it was just me and Doug Wilson. And now we are a little boutique firm of 8 people. We have 6 lawyers and 2 staff people, and we're located in Newport Beach, and it is lovely. Like, I can see us getting a little bit bigger, but not much bigger. I think we're like the perfect size.
Oh, so your goal is not to become a large law firm or even a medium-sized law firm. You like having the size that you are at.
No, I do not aspire to that. I mean, if we wanted to do that, I'm sure we could, but we just do one thing and we do it really, really well. And so, our appeal is that we're one of the really amazing boutiques with a lot of talent. All of our attorneys are former alums of big firms. They all went to good law schools. Everybody really likes it here because we're different than a big firm. And, our clients really like it because we're just so efficient. So it's good because if you're small, you can maintain that quality. So we're kind of like the A team that you would find at a larger firm, but there's no B team, no C team. I don't honestly have the time or patience to deal with that. And, at a larger firm, I always felt a lot of pressure to take all the cases and clients that came in. And now we just pick the projects and clients that are interesting, and then the rest we refer out, and it, helps me keep my sanity. And so I don't feel any need to grow.
What's your mix of plaintiffs and defense work? Is it half-half? Or are you mostly one or the other?
So we're very unusual for our size because most small firms are either on plaintiff or defense side. Luckily in IP, you can do both.
Yeah.
So we do, most of our clients are very large companies, often publicly traded, and sometimes they are the plaintiff and sometimes they're the defendant.
Okay.
Just sort of depends on the case. So, we save patents, we kill patents. So that's very unusual about us.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much 50-50.
Yeah, interesting. So now, let's see, you've been a partner at a law firm. You've now started your own law firm. Is there anything else in Michelle's future? Could you see yourself doing anything else completely different, or maybe doing something outside of the law? Be an entrepreneur of something else. Do you ever see anything like that?
I mean, I never say never because I just don't know what the future holds. I mean, if you had asked me 10 years ago if I would be running my own law firm right now, I probably would have told you no.
Yeah.
But you got to do the right thing for you, and this was absolutely the right move. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a lot of talents and there's a lot of things I could do well, but this right now is really checking all the boxes for me because I love being a lawyer and I get to be a lawyer. And I've always wanted to have like my own business. And of course, as a partner at a large firm, you still are kind of running your own business. But now I really have my own business with my name on the door. And so that has always been a dream of mine. So I'm still very interested. I still feel like there's a lot we can do. And I'm just having a lot of fun. So I don't know what the future holds, but right now I'm very, very happy with where we're at.
Well, Michelle, it's been really wonderful chatting with you. I'm so glad my advice actually helped you. Very rare to have that happen. If you do decide one day to do something else, please come back and tell me about it.
Absolutely. You will always be the first to know, Richard. Thanks so much.
This is Richard Hsu and Michelle Armond.